Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Grayscale trusts, but we're not actually going to go over them per se. What we're going to do today instead is we're going to talk about rotation of capital going into the peak part of the bull run cycle and how you could potentially use this to maximize profits on the way up, depending on the timing of the trusts. So with that being said, let's get it. So first thing I would like to show you guys here is the correlation between Bitcoin and LTCN. So we got to go way back here. Way back. All right. So this will kind of give an indication as to where LTCN could seriously start popping off in this bull run. There is a reason why we're doing this. So just bear with me here. See if I can figure out what's going on here. So okay, so something to keep in mind here. The first thing I want you guys to notice is that so we have Bitcoin on the left, we have LTCN on the right. So first thing I want you guys to notice is LTCN actually did not exist, at least according to this chart, until after Bitcoin's halving. So we do know that the halving for Bitcoin in 2020 was in May. That was shortly after this pandemic dump. Kind of sold off, came back up, because then the Fed was printing trillions upon trillions of dollars. So of course the markets were going to go up because some of that money was flowing into investor hands, which makes sense. So the halving was right around here of May of 2020. Now, if you guys see on the right side of the chart, so LTCN did not even exist then. So we'll move this over a little bit more so you can actually see. So May 2020, there was no LTCN. So the halving happened, and then shortly after that, like roughly around summertime, LTCN came into existence. And as soon as we had a break of this downtrend line right here, that was it in terms of starting the bull run. So as soon as Bitcoin took off and started smashing towards all-time highs, LTCN also took off and started smashing towards all-time highs. But do note that even at the halving point, LTCN did not immediately start taking off. It didn't start taking off until roughly around the end of the year, similar to Bitcoin, when Bitcoin had its true parabolic run. So all this here from 4K to roughly about 10K before it started taking off was really just kind of the warm-up phase for Bitcoin. But once it started going parabolic, I mean, it was really obvious the EMAs were kind of fanning out. The price just moonshot extremely quickly. And basically LTCN started popping off just shortly before Bitcoin started breaking all-time highs. So the one key thing I want to point out here is that Bitcoin at this point in time has not had its halving yet. Okay. So I suspect that LTCN is probably not going to really start popping off until sometime after the halving. So just keep that in mind. So that's the first thing I want to point out. Now we're going to go ahead and actually compare some of these different trusts so you guys can we'll actually do a few comparisons on Bitcoin here. So we'll talk about the major ones that we usually look at, which is LTCN, BCHG, and HZEN and ETCG. So notice that LTCN started popping off right around October of 2020 and it topped out in November of 2020. So it didn't even take that long. It was like a month, if not less, or maybe a little bit more, maybe a month to 2 months. So October to November of 2020. BCHG also very similar, October to November 2020, except this one didn't peak out until December. So very similar moving to LTCN. Again, we told you guys that Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash are oscillators to Bitcoin. What that means is when Bitcoin goes up, Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash will go up. Because again, they're oscillators to Bitcoin. An oscillator means that it will follow the price of whatever the token is that it's tracking, in this case, because it's a cryptocurrency. So the bottom here was very similar to LTCN. So LTCN's bottom was kind of further back. So if we actually go back here, you can see that LTCN was sitting at lows from August until October. So it was a little bit more slow moving than BCHG, but BCHG was actually pretty high up in August of 2020. Part of that probably was because of the DeFi summer. of 2020, we had that shortly after the halving. Altcoins started popping off. I suspect something similar is probably going to happen this year too. But very similar to LTCN, it popped off roughly around the same time, except it peaked out roughly about a month later. And this one peaked out just as Bitcoin was breaking previous all-time highs. We have not seen those moves yet on BCHG and LTCN. And I'm convinced that it's the main reason why I'm convinced of this is because we're just too far ahead in the cycle, because the spot Bitcoin ETFs kind of accelerated the price of Bitcoin. I've said this before. I think that we're probably due for a retracement of some kind, or at least a sideways chop, maybe slightly down on Bitcoin while altcoins pop off, giving the EMAs a chance to come back and meet with the price. So price comes down, EMAs go up, and then we kind of just retest the EMAs, and that de-risks the market. So that way it gives the market a longer period of time to run up, which is what we would prefer. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would not mind if Bitcoin came down 20, 30%, and then they were able to buy some Bitcoin and altcoins on the cheap. I know we would like that very much. We've actually stated that we're going to hold back from buying more crypto at this time because we think that Bitcoin and altcoins could have a massive push down, and we'll wait to start reaccumulating kind of probably somewhere around, I would say somewhere in between 40 to 50,000. So we got our bags ready, but if we get that big drop, we're definitely going to be aping back in and be buying this thing. So let's take a look at one more example, or two more examples. So HZEN, as you guys know, this is the Horizon one. We have the underlying, but we don't have the actual Grayscale trust yet. We're waiting for a pullback on that. So this one is interesting. So we had a peak basically around the time that LTCN and BCHG started popping off. This thing had dumped, and it kind of dumped and chopped sideways. And you guys can see that it didn't kind of really, oh wait, my bad. So this is the wrong year. So this is 2021. So this one never actually got to run. So we don't really know if this one is going to run early or run late. It is already starting to move. So not really sure about this one yet. But we'll take a look at ETCG. So this is another one that's been around for a while. We'll scroll all the way back down here. This one has actually a lot of history, a lot more than even LTCN and BCHG, which is kind of crazy. So this is a very good example of what we could look at to kind of gauge when this is going to pop off. So I got to move the charts back over here. Give me just a second on this. Okay, so we noticed that this thing did also bottom out and started moving up roughly around the same time as LTCN and BCHG. So it bottomed out in October, and do note it was moving up. However, this thing did not peak. It didn't actually have a peak until all the way up here in May of 2021. Now you guys might be asking, why is that? Well, it's pretty simple. Like we told you guys, ETH Classic is an oscillator to Ethereum. Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash are oscillators to Bitcoin. So generally the way the market moves is Bitcoin runs first, then it tapers off a little bit, then Ethereum runs. And of course, this is the oscillator to Ethereum, ETH Classic. So ETH Classic is going to run with Ethereum. And then after that point, altcoins run. Okay, so it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins. So what you could have hypothetically done is you could have actually, like way back here in November, December of 2020, we'll take one more look at this so you guys can see it again. So November, December 2020, somewhere in there, you could have cashed out of LTCN and BCHG, okay, because that's when the peaks were. And you could have put the money in way down here on ETH Classic at $7, and you would have basically rode it all the way to the top, like, what is this, 6 months later, for more than an extra 10x. So let's go ahead and do some simple math on this. So let's say you only put $1,000 in LTCN somewhere at the bottom. We'll just pick a random number. We'll say $40, and you sold at $400. So that basically would have been a 10x, right? So 1,000 times 10, you get 10,000 bucks. Do something similar with BCHG. So you decided you were going to buy like down here somewhere. We'll say $11 was your price, and you got out at, I don't know, 55 bucks or something. Let's just say you managed to somehow get pretty close to the top. So basically you would have turned LTCN's 1,000 into 10,000, BCHG's 1,000 into 5,000. So you would have had 15,000 bucks. So you could have then turned around and said, okay, well, I have this money. So now what do I do with it? Of course, be smart, not financial advice, but if you make money, make sure you set aside taxes. Something y'all need to understand is if you, and I'm not a tax advisor, but if you make, let's say $100,000 in a year, but then you lose that same $100,000, if you sold for a profit, but then you move something that you sold for profit into a new position and you lose all that money, you still owe the taxes on that $100,000. Okay. And the maximum loss that you can write off on a year, what's known as tax loss harvesting, you can only do up to $3,000 a year unless you have trader tax status. Trader tax status is very hard to get. It does allow for unlimited losses, but you have to go in front of a judge and you have to do it once a year. Again, you have to be a day trader to do this. It is extremely difficult to get. So most people only get that $3,000 loss. Don't quote me on that. Check with your CPA to make sure this is accurate. But as far as I know, this is the most up-to-date, accurate information. And it's not financial advice. But so basically, set aside taxes. We'll say, okay, well, you might owe maybe, well, let's actually, so we'll take the initial 2,000 out of that. We'll say you made 13,000. Take 20% out of that, so 2,600. We'll just be generous here and say it was 3,000. So you're left with 10,000 bucks, right? So you got your 10,000 plus your $2,000 initial investment, and you could say, well, I want to go ahead and put all this into ETCG. I'll get in somewhere around, let's say $6, and then you write it, I don't know, let's say up to 55, or well, we won't say 55. We'll keep it simple here. So we'll say 66 bucks. So you get a 10x. So basically your 12,000 then would have turned into 132,000, and you guys can keep rotating this capital. You see how this works, right? It's just a matter of being able to time the different funds. So we'll take a look at another one. So this one peaked out in May of 2021. This is the GXLM. So we don't have any data on this because this one's still relatively new. It came out during the peak of November 2021. So not really a whole lot of data on this. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it works out. So ETH, we'll take a look at this one. Okay, so this one was around. So you guys can see that ETH actually started, this is kind of interesting, but ETH actually started ramping up even before Bitcoin had its halving event, and even before LTCN and BCHG took off. So what you could have done with that is, well, this thing started running up roughly around the same time as the previous one, which was, what was it, ETCG. So you could have, I suppose you could have done a 50-50 split. You could have cashed out of LTCN and BCHG up here, waited for a pullback. Let's say you got it at 12 bucks. And then you guys can see the peak was obviously quite a bit higher, but it wasn't that much. So about a 4x. It does appear to be wanting to push highs already, though. So this thing could go much higher this cycle. But the point is it topped out much later than LTCN and BCHG. So you could have rotated that capital in between the two. This one, again, is relatively new. We don't have any history here. I don't know why the candles are so big. Let's just switch over and the candles just get like really huge. It's kind of weird. All right, so yeah, all these are relatively new. These have not had any previous cycle historical data that we can go on, unfortunately. So yeah, there's not much we can really do with this. But basically, based on previous history, if LTCN and BCHG run first, you could then move that capital over into something like ETCG, or even ETH if you time it right, because again, Bitcoin's generally going to run before Ethereum does. And with the current history, we can actually, I'll show you guys this real quick. So Let's actually switch this over to Ethereum so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. Because we haven't really covered Ethereum that much on this channel. Kind of mainly just Bitcoin. The reason why is because Bitcoin is the market mover. But if we go back here, so you can see that Bitcoin started taking off in December of 2020 and it topped out April 2021. But you can see that Ethereum during April 2021 was just getting ready to break this resistance and didn't top out until roughly about a month later. By the time Ethereum topped out, Bitcoin was already dumping off. And then, of course, Ethereum dumped off and followed suit. Okay. So they don't move exactly alike, but very close. But generally speaking, Ethereum usually comes right after Bitcoin's peak. So as of right now, Bitcoin has hit all-time highs. Okay. So we know that the previous cycle peak for Bitcoin was 69,000. The current cycle peak for Bitcoin is roughly about 74,000. So it has already hit all-time highs, a little prematurely, I would say, because of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, which is why we're waiting for a pullback. But of course, we could also just DCAN for the remainder of the months of the year until Bitcoin really starts moving up. But Ethereum's peak was all the way back here at 4,800. And we've seen Ethereum run up, but we have not seen it break all-time highs yet. So we're not even close to the all-time highs. It went from 4,100 all the way down to 3,300 currently, as low as almost 3,000. So from that low, we still have roughly about 33% move up. So this Ethereum not being at all-time highs and the altcoins still being down significantly, like 60, 70, 80% from previous all-time highs, convinces me that we have not seen the true parabolic phase of the bull run yet. And also the Bitcoin dominance has not sold off yet. Usually when the Bitcoin dominance sells off, that's when Ethereum and altcoins run. And shortly after that, that's usually when we see either a mid-cycle peak, like a local peak, not the true one, but a local peak and or the cycle high, okay? Usually when Ethereum and altcoins run, Bitcoin dominance dumps off. That usually means we're pretty close to the end of the cycle. Have not seen that yet. So I think there's still a long time and a lot of room for these altcoins and Ethereum and Bitcoin to run up, assuming that we get that healthy pullback and everything plays out exactly like I think it's going to. So there's two ways that you could do this in terms of taking profits. Okay, you could just simply buy into your positions and then hold, say, these are my price targets. This is what I'm going to sell at some point in the future, and keep an eye on the prices. Or you could rotate the capital. So I'll give you an example. So we'll say LTCN. So our average price was $13, or roughly around $13. Okay. This is how much we have in LTCN. You guys have seen this on our channel. If it only goes back up to $500, if that's all it does and does not go to new all-time highs, which would be, I would say, like the average case scenario, still going to be nearly a 38.5x. So 38.5x times this, you guys can see the amount here. And then we'll say, hypothetically, we have to pay like a third in taxes because, taxes, of course. So 192,500, say minus 68K. So this is what we'd be left over with. Plus, of course, well, I mean, our initial investment would be in there too. But so this is what we'd be left over with. We could put the entire thing into something else, or we could just take like a small amount, like let's say this, put it into ETCG or something else that we rotate into that hasn't run yet to produce more profits. Whether you guys choose to just buy and hold, sell at the top, or, scale out, which is another way of doing it, just sell as it goes up, percentages like, a third, quarters, something like that, or rotate into different positions, is entirely up to you. There are three unique strategies that you could do. But do understand that if you understand that you will have to pay taxes if you make $100,000, but then you lose $100,000, meaning you took profits, but then you put it into something else and you lost all your money. Well, you're still going to owe money on that 100,000. So something to keep in mind. Anyways, this is a video on how to rotate capital in the Grayscale trusts. Keep in mind, we have not seen a lot of these have previous cycle runs. So some of these are very new. We will keep an eye out on these and let you guys know which ones are running first and which ones are lagging behind when we see it happen. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all later. Peace.